I would like to, before we introduce John, I would like to, for each of us to introduce ourselves and maybe where we are now. Since John's not actually at the meeting, it'll make him feel more a part of us. So I'll start with myself. I'm Sharon Herman. I'm in Cambridge right now. And that's it.
I'm Arnie Miller, and I'm in Cambridge.
Oh, shit. Can you go turn your phone off?
It's going to be difficult to introduce everyone.
Oh,
So I've unmuted everyone. It's going to complicate the recording, but we'll figure it out.
Right. We don't.
I don't think we should do it.
Oh,
Okay.
all right. Let's mute everyone, and we can introduce later before the Q&A.
Right.
So, Sharon, your mic is on. Sharon, where are you? Hang on one second. Okay. All right, Sharon, you're on. Go ahead.
Okay. Can you all hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, great. So before I do the formal introduction of John, let's doing this. I would just like to tell you how I came to know John. And so John is my and many others meditation teacher and practices Buddhism in the way of Thich Nhat Hanh, which I'll tell you in a minute. And I've been practicing with you, John, I think like 15 years. And then Arnie saw, when you see something good, he always wants to jump in. So he's been doing it too. We meet every 2 weeks at John's house, and it's really been a constant in my life and something that I feel like has helped me so much to live in the world we have, in the crazy world that we have right now. So I thought his wisdom would really be very appropriate for what we're going through right now. So informally, John Bell has been a student of Thich Nhat Hanh since 1982. He was ordained in his Order of Interbeing in 2001 and is a Dharma teacher in the Plum Village tradition. He has been facilitating the Mountain Bell Sangha in the Boston area since 1997. That's where we go. He offers retreats around the country, writes and publishes, and has served on the Earth Holders Community Caretaking Council, the Arise Core Group, and the CTC of the North American Plum Village Dharma Teachers Sangha. In his wider world life, he has 40 years of experience in the youth field as teacher, counselor, community organizer, leadership trainer, director, and father. He is founding staff member of 3 youth organizations, Youth Action Program in 1978 in East Harlem, the originator of Youth Build, Children of War in 1984, an international leadership organization, and of Youth Build USA in 1988. Until his recent retirement, John was the vice president for leadership development at Youth Build USA, an international nonprofit with 350 programs in 15 countries that work with young people who have dropped out of school and provides them with further education, vocational training, building tangible community assets, and leadership skills. He is a nationally recognized trainer and consultant in the area of youth leadership, development, peer counseling, and healing and diversity. He has done training and consulting for the Peace Corps in Africa and South America, and he is author of published articles and handbooks. His most recent book is Youth Build's North Star. Welcome, John.
Thank you very much, Sharon, and thank you for arranging this talk with you all, and thank you for the Rotary Club for inviting me. I really appreciate the Rotary Club. For decades, you can all hear me okay?
Yes.
You can hear me fine?
Yes, we can.
I mean, I've had such respect for the work of Rotary people, community entrepreneurs. Sharon and Arnie have told me about the trips internationally that your local club has done to serve people with less resource than yourselves, and I really just honor that work. for all of these decades. I bet some of you have been involved. These are, Sharon's told me that the topic was sort of up to me, but would like to include some meditation. So what I'd like to, these are unprecedented trying times we're all living through. The sickness, the death, the uncertainty, the shutting down of normalcy, the uncertainty about what future is ahead of us, brings up lots of feelings for all of us, I know, all around the globe. Never before have we had such a tiny little organism bring humanity to its knees. It's an amazing time to reflect. So one of the questions is, and I hope all of your loved ones are healthy and have the support to get through this. One of the questions I think that we're sitting with is, how do we hold this? What's the view we have about this? How does it sit in our psyche, both individually and collectively? So what I'd like to propose for the next while that we're together is to do a kind of guided meditation where we relax our bodies and minds a little bit. Then I'd like to offer a couple of reflections from a kind of Buddhist point of view. It might be helpful. I don't know if Sharon was saying that my wisdom would help. I don't know how about that. I think we have a lot of wisdom right here in this group if we all had a chance to talk. And then to have chance for time for questions or comments or sharing from you. Does that sound okay?
Yes, it sounds great.
Okay, good, thank you. Well, for a long time, one of the tools that's helped me maintain a certain calmness in the midst of storms is meditation. I remember when I first met Thich Nhat Hanh, one of the stories, he's a Vietnamese Zen master who grew up, came of age during the Vietnam Wars, both with the French and the US. They call it the US War, we call it the Vietnam War. And I met him in 1982, and he told a story. He said when the boat people who were escaping Vietnam in the early 70s, they would climb on these small little fishing boats, 30, 40 of them, trying to cross the sea to the refugee camps in Thailand. And if a storm came up, the people would panic and they'd sort of run from side to side. And that motion itself could help flip the boat and they would perish. But he said if there were one person among them who could sit quietly in that storm, their model could help calm people down and they had a better chance of riding out the storm to safety. And then Thich Nhat Hanh turned to all of us listening. He said, who among us can sit in the storms of our lives with that kind of calmness? And I thought, I'd like to know what he knows. And that's what started me on this journey towards the center of his community. So I just found that mindfulness meditation has been a great tool to help me deal with my mind, because we bring our minds everywhere with us, and it affects and infects the way we look at things. And we're in a storm right now. So I thought maybe we could just do a few minutes of meditation. And I'd like to do a kind of guided one. I'm going to read a letter, an imagined letter from COVID-19 to humanity. Some of you may have seen this, it's been circulating. So if you would, just find a comfortable position where your body just feels more relaxed. And if it feels comfortable to close your eyes, you're invited to close your eyes. And I'm gonna, as we say in our tradition, invite the sound of this beautiful bell. Sometimes it doesn't sound as good as it does over the electronic waves as it does in person. But I'll invite this bell three times, and just allow yourself with each breath just to kind of go a little deeper in relaxation. And with your eyes closed, bring your attention to your body, however it is right now. Just smiling to your body, saying hello. Thank you for bringing you thus far in life. And locating your breath where you can feel it most vividly, maybe at the nostrils, maybe at the abdomen. Just bring your attention there and notice the inflow and outflow of your breath. Most meditative traditions of all varieties have the breath as one of the anchors, one of the objects of meditation, because the mind tends to slow down depending on what it follows. The breath, if left to itself, tends to kind of slow down, relax, get deeper. And the mind is then allowed to relax some. There's no place to go, nothing to do right here in this moment. And bringing our attention to the breath really allows us to be in this moment. And it's very relaxing to be in the moment. No worries, no regrets. And breathing in, I know I'm breathing in. And breathing out, I know I'm breathing out. Sometimes I anchor with just saying to myself silently, in, out. With your eyes remaining closed, I'd like to read a letter called Stop, an imagined letter from COVID-19 to humans. Stop, just stop. It's no longer a request, it's a mandate. We will help you. We will bring the supersonic, high-speed merry-go-round to a halt. We will stop the planes, the trains, the schools, the malls, the meetings. The frenetic, furried rush of illusions and obligations that keep you from hearing our single and shared beating heart, the way we breathe together in unison. Our obligation is to each other. It always has been, even though you have forgotten. So we will interrupt this broadcast, this endless cacophonous broadcast of divisions and distractions, to bring you this long breaking news. We are not well. All of us are suffering. Last year, the firestorms that scorched the lungs of the earth did not give you pause, nor the typhoons in Africa, China, Japan, nor the fevered climates in India. You have not been listening, dear friends. It's hard to listen when you're so busy all the time, hustling to uphold the comforts and conveniences that scaffold your life. But the foundation is giving way, buckling under the weight of your human needs and desires. We will help you. We will bring the firestorms to your body. We will bring the fever to your body. We will bring the burning, searing, and flooding to your lungs that you might hear this. We are not well. Despite what you might think or feel, we are not the enemy. We are the messenger. We are ally. We are a balancing force. We are asking you to stop, to be still, to listen, to move beyond your individual concerns and consider the concerns of all, to be with your ignorance, to find your humility, to relinquish your thinking minds and travel deep into the mind of the heart, to look up into the sky with fewer planes streaking it, to look into a tree and see it, notice its conditions. How does its health contribute to the health of the sky, to the air you need to be healthy? Visit a river and see it, notice its condition. Clear, clean, murky, polluted? How much do you need that to be healthy? Many are afraid now. Do not demonize your fear, but also do not let it rule you. Instead, let it speak. In your stillness, listen for its wisdom. What might it be telling you about what is at work, at issue, at risk, beyond the threats of personal inconvenience and illness? Stop. Notice if you are resisting. Notice what you are resisting. Ask why. Stop. Just stop. Be still. Listen. Ask what we might teach you about illness and healing, about what might be required so that all may be well. We will help you if you listen. We'll just sit for a couple of minutes absorbing that. Oh, you may open your eyes as you feel fit and maybe take a little stretch if it seems right. Ah, yes. So thank you for doing that with me. I hope you found it enjoyable and a little refreshing. I'd like to just offer a couple of reflections on the pandemic, and starting with a story. Some of you may have heard this story. It's an old story. In 1992, during the bombing of Sarajevo, there was a cellist, an old man who was a cellist, who went out into the rubble of the town square and started playing his cello. And a news person came out and said, "Why are you playing the cello when they're bombing?" And the cellist said, "Why are they bombing while I'm playing the cello?" And I love this story because it kind of points out that our perspective matters, doesn't it? Our viewpoint affects how we think and feel and act. So in that case, we'll be paying attention to the violence or paying attention to the beauty. So there's a lot in this pandemic situation that we could pay attention to. There's sort of the nonstop reporting that generates more worry and fear. There are all the different theories, conspiracy theories and blaming and gotcha kind of stuff going on, you know. But I just wanted to offer a couple, which to me are sort of underneath this suffering, and there's a lot of suffering going on, obviously. So one is, and these are things that I've been reading and hearing, and you may have read some of the same things too. One is what are the underlying conditions across the globe that make for fertile ground for a virus like this? One writer looked at the conditions, the data from Italy. It showed that only 1% of the people who died were healthy. The rest had underlying conditions. 73% had hypertension, 34% had diabetes, 33% had autoimmune stuff. So there's a lot of stuff that was already waiting there, unhealthy conditions. So one question is, why aren't we paying attention to those worldwide? Another, last year, 5 million children around the world, 5 million children died of hunger. 162 million were considered wasted and stunted. Why aren't we doing a national, global emergency to prevent that? Another 5 million people around the world died of air pollution because of emissions and toxic stuff and factory smokestacks. Why is there no national global emergency organized to prevent these kinds of underlying conditions? Deeper still is this perspective. One writer said he thinks that the thousands of years of conditioning to make us feel separate from each other, separate from nature, dominant over nature, the thousands of years of oppression, of patriarchy, racism, all the kinds of warfare, the thousands of years of instilled trauma that children experience, and then when they grow up, they have less fulfilling lives and are more reactive. He says that those thousands of years of mistreatment have weakened the collective immune system of humankind. Another even deeper underlying condition. I think that's really interesting to think that. When I was a boy, and maybe for some of you, many of us look around the same generation, we didn't have things like peanut allergies and autoimmune things. There's so many kind of new things showing up in the human sickness panoply. And maybe it's partly the result of the surfacing of these underlying conditions.
Mhm.
We have one person said that we have each of our bodies now is a repository of about 200 toxic chemicals that we've absorbed through our water, our food, our air, the things we put on our bodies, our hair, you know, shaving cream, perfumes, all kinds of stuff, the drugs that we use. Those get lodged in our systems, and we, you know, so we have these new kinds of diseases. So I think it's really interesting that we have, why aren't we really paying attention to this? A friend of mine in Tampa I talked to last week, he used to work with the homeless in Tampa. And Sunday was a very hot day in Florida, in Tampa. So he went out with bottles of water to distribute to the homeless folks. And he went to all the corners where he usually found them. Nobody was there. He learned that the city had set up a tent city for homeless people, gave them each a tent separated by 6 or 8 feet with a cot, little nightstand, a blanket, and a porta potty, public porta potty, and a public laundromat. He says, you know how hard it is for homeless people to find a place to go to the bathroom? And there are 5 million people, homeless people, living on the streets in our, he said, why aren't we creating, why is it only during the pandemic that we think about them? Is it maybe that we don't want the, quote, dirty people infecting the clean people? So that's one thing. Looking at since everything is interconnected, Buddhism has this idea that what Thich Nhat Hanh calls interbeing, that everything is interconnected. There's an image called Indra's net. Think of a kind of a web with each node of the web. At each node is a jewel, a many-faceted jewel that reflects all the other nodes, so that it's an infinite kind of reflection and interconnection. So this leads me to the second thing that I would like to share is what I call unbroken wholeness. That this pandemic, like the reading I did, is not necessarily an enemy. We're fighting it like it's a vicious pathogen. We're in a war. There's a lot of war mentality, war language being used. But this virus comes out of the same basic creative force of life that you and I do, that trees do, that fish and flowers do. There's no separation in some way. And if I can see that, so the coronavirus and I are intimately related, partly through these underlying conditions that I was talking about a minute ago. So it brings up the question for me, which is a very deep question, well, who are we as a species? It's a question that we ask, you know, most human beings who have a little slack in their life. We ask that question from time to time. Who are we? Are we sort of small selves battling in isolation, evils and enemies and conditions in society which are out to get us? That's one way to look at it. Many of us have been beat up badly enough, many of us human beings, been beat up badly enough that's an understandable attitude towards life. It's me against the world. Nobody's going to take care of me. The government won't take care of me, you know. We're insecure. We're scurrying around now in the virus situation, protecting ourselves and, you know, stocking up our food and getting enough toilet paper and, you know, trying to ride it out until we return to what? What do we want to return to? What is the normalcy that has been beneficial, and what is the normalcy that we'd like to transcend and change? This is the question that this virus, I think, is asking. Is it giving us an opportunity to think about. Do we want to return to an essentially unjust economic system that's based on greed, where you all in the Rotary Club are, contributing to fund after fund and cause after cause to try to correct some of the imbalances? Do we want to return to a place where people are pitted against each other, where people are destroying the climate for profit, where our children's future is imperiled because of those kinds of forces? We don't really want to return to that. I don't think. At least I'm going to assume that's true of people on this call. You've already proven by your involvement here that you care about a bigger world, a community. So here's a little, I just ran across this morning, and then I'll stop and we can talk among ourselves. There's a little quote from Arundhati Roy, the great Indian scholar and advocate. She says, what is this thing that's happened to us? It's a virus, yes. In and of itself, it holds no moral brief, but it's definitely more than a virus. Some believe it's God's way of bringing us to our senses. Others believe it's a Chinese conspiracy to take over the world. Whatever it is, the coronavirus has made the mighty kneel and brought the world to a halt like nothing else. Our minds are still racing back and forth, longing to return to a normality, trying to stitch our future to our past and refusing to acknowledge the rupture. But the rupture exists. And in the midst of this terrible despair, it offers us a chance to rethink the doomsday machine we've built for ourselves. Nothing could be worse than a return to normalcy. Historically, pandemics have forced humans to break with the past and imagine their world anew. This one is no different. It's a portal, a gateway between one world and the next. And our last paragraph is this: we can choose to walk through it, dragging the carcasses of our prejudice and hatred, our avarice, our data banks and dead ideas, our dead rivers and smoking skies behind us. Or we can walk through it lightly, with little luggage, ready to imagine another world and ready to fight for it. So this I think is the question that the virus raises for us all. What is the world we want to return to? And how much are we willing to give to make that happen? So thank you very much for listening. In my tradition, we bow out, in and out, acknowledging not a prayer, but in addition, it's like we put our hands in a lotus position, offering to the other people an acknowledgement of their God nature, their Buddha nature, their creative nature, their depth. So I offer that to you in gratitude. Thank you very much. And I'd like to just open it up for people can unmute themselves as they wish for comments or questions or your own reflections.
And, thank you so much, Mr. Bell. I'm going to unmute Toby and John because they don't have a way to unmute themselves, and Gloria and anybody else. You can unmute yourself as you wish or raise your hand. Great. Thank you so much. Sharon, did you want to make any final comments, or George?
No, I'm fine.
I'd like to thank you. On behalf of myself, there was one little thing that you mentioned as you were leading us into the meditation that really struck a chord, and that had to do with thanking your body for getting you this far. And for the last several years, I have muttered to myself, my wife, my sister-in-law, occasionally one of my many doctors, you know, I hate my body. I have between the hip that's been the artificial hip that's been there for years, and the heart disease, and now the pacemaker, and the cancer treatment that involves a diminution of stamina and of muscle mass, and limiting things. And I've said, you know, I hate my body. And that was just a moment of, wait, thank you. Wait, you got all this stuff and you're beyond 78 years old, and you think of yourself as a healthy person, and it wasn't just the pills, and it's not just walking the dog. And I should be a little more appreciative of my body and thank my body for getting me this far. And I thank you, John, for reminding me of that.
You're welcome.
So, Sharon, did you want to add anything?
I just wanted to say one thing quickly, just because this is new, what we were talking about of maybe, putting on big, and of course we have to talk to John too about his portion of how comfortable he is. It's our cable network and Brookline. We're not going to do anything. But I just want to say that if people want to share things, go ahead and share it. We're going to edit it. We're not going to put anything private on that at all. So I just want people to feel open.
I'd like to say, John, this Honey Miller, I want to say thank you, John. What was very significant in this little meditation was the COVID letter that even though I fear the COVID virus because of my high risk, but during this time, I've been connecting with family and friends with FaceTime and Zoom more so than normally. And it's made me reflect on the fact that we are connected to our relationships, and that the world we want to go back to has to be a better one than we left. So maybe this is a blessing in disguise, this COVID virus, even though I fear it deeply.
Richard?
So thank you, John. And I want to pick up on Arnie's comments because I think I do totally agree. First of all, just thank you for helping us step back for a moment. And I agree totally that from crises or strife or adversity, we can all learn. What I found problematic was the implication that there is value beyond. We are living, I think all of us, from a position of great privilege, although we might be at risk in some ways ourselves because of age or comorbidities. We're not bearing the brunt of this in a way that so many others around us are. And to suggest that I believe COVID-19 is an enemy, and it's horrific what's happening to our friends and families. And I think we can learn from war, we can learn from strife, we can learn from adversity, but we shouldn't mix up the messages. We don't want to return to normalcy, but other people may desperately need to return to normalcy. I agree with the overall statement, but I'm just sharing my reaction to part of the message about we can afford to say those things in the context of our lives. And it makes me think of how privileged, how lucky, how fortunate we are. None of us are hopefully not are worried about how we're going to pay the rent on May 1st, or whether or not we can afford to buy food. And many, many others in this world are, including in the United States, including in Boston and in Brookline.
Thank you, Richard, for that elaboration. I didn't mention it, but one of the underlying conditions, of course, is that this lays bare is the racial and class inequities, and many of those people are also disproportionately suffering with those other health underlying conditions. So it's all interwoven together. Definitely, yeah. Thank you. Other folks?
Right. And one of the things that came up for me was the number of issues that the Rotary Club has been focusing on globally that are being highlighted by this crisis. So maternal and child care, access to health care, and just relieving poverty, trying to help communities come out of poverty. All of that is very relevant today, and even more so because of the health crisis. Great. Any other thoughts from anyone? Thank you so much.
Oh, I've thought.
Sure.
So listening to both Richard and John, and having been in this practice for a while, what I took from what you said, John, was not that the reason we don't see this as a war is, well, one thing, I'm very practical. It's easier for us to live our lives every day if we're not against the war. It's just a calmer, and it comes from a better place of still giving and still being aware and still recognizing, for me at least. And that what we're saying is that this is laying bare what we don't, we don't want to return to that normalcy where those people, I don't mean those people, all of us, those people that financially and whatever have to be put into this kind of position because they have so much instability in their life. So that's the way I understood it. I'm done. Thank you.